at the same time. So my multitasking skills are being challenged. Okay. Let's see. You're on that microphone there, and there's our headphone
There we
volume.
go.
Isn't it nice to be super prepared?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm always prepared.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Sheriff, good morning. We want to say, first of all, thank you for being here this morning earlier than normal.
Right.
Sheriff Palmer was invited to be here along with the Murphy Police Department to be here, part of Caleb McCoy's program on drug recovery. And I think it's very important for addicts to be able to have people they can trust and know that you are in the same place they are, that you want to see them succeed in their recovery.
Well, I think, anybody that missed that this morning, they need to go back and watch that there on your Facebook page. It's important to understand that people that are addicted to different substances that are going through these things, they're human beings also. And even though they're in a bad place in life and bad things are happening, there is still hope. There is still a future for people. We just got to figure out how to help them get there, how to help them get to that place.
Whoops, I need to turn my microphone back on. There we go. I don't know why I turned it off. And you're on the same page too. You have been spending a lot of time looking for solutions and
Right.
wanting to find a centralized way for people to go for help. So for folks that may have tuned in today that may have not heard your ideas on how to fix the problem or how to help the problem, I don't think it'll ever be fixed completely. But if we can make a huge impact, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, I think you're kind of delusional if you think that we're going to rid our community completely, entirely of drugs, and that we're not going to have those problems or issues here. I don't think that that's ever going to happen. But I do think that we should be proactive and try and take those steps to try to mitigate it to the best of our ability. When you think about these things, you think about these people that are addicted to drugs, more often than not, there's some type of underlying factor to that. You do have people that, and I was watching a situation this morning on television that was interviewing a person that was addicted to heroin, and they were trying through recovery and stuff there before I came in here this morning. And, a lot of times we tend to forget that a lot of people get addicted to drugs legitimately. They get addicted through pain medications. They might have been in an accident. They could have gotten hurt in some way and become dependent upon those drugs. And if those drugs are too expensive, they can't afford them, or no longer available by the doctor prescription. Sometimes because of that addiction, they may turn to other illegal substances and things of that nature. So when you think about the people that are addicted out there, it's not always what we picture in our mind is a criminal that's just out here being defiant against society, that just wants to do what they want to do. More often than not, it's good people that's going through bad circumstances and bad situations. And so we need to understand that. We need to know that. And we need to look for ways to try to help those people get back on their feet.
We've mentioned several times on the radio and former programs that, all people who have been arrested are not bad people, like you
Right.
just mentioned. And the two guests we had this morning are living examples of that. Now that they are in recovery and are sober,
Right.
look what good they are doing. They are doing so much for the community, and they're wanting to help others follow that path.
But I think, Dustin Smith mentioned this morning from the police department, that it's one of those things that as much as we want to try to help and as much as we want to try to look for those solutions and do come up with some solutions to try to help these things, we can't touch people like they can.
Right.
People that's been through it, that's been there, that lived through it, they have places they can reach and people they can get to and people they can talk to that will listen to them. When I may not make a difference, or you may not make a difference in their lives, or we may not make a great impact in their lives, but some of these people that's been through it and been through the recovery process can make that great impact in someone's life because they're living proof that you can do it, that you can come through that and be a better person on the other side. One of the things that we do at the detention center that is the most successful part of what we do there in helping people with recovery is not only do we do the ministry there within the center with different pastors and lay people within the community, but from time to time we have those that are recovering addicts come back to the jail and talk to them about this is my experience and when I went through jail and when I went through recovery and when I was going through these things. and this is where I'm at in my life. And not all of those stories coming back in there and talking to those people are that I've beat it and that I'm in a good place. Some of them are still in the process of recovering. But it shows them that through different stages of recovery, that if you can be determined and set your mind to it and decide this is what you're going to do, that you can come through it and you can come out on the other side. But it takes those people that's been through it to reach those people a lot of times. And those are the most successful things that we have in a jail that helps people start down that road to recovery.
I see that because those people have been down that road, so they become this trusted person. And I think we mentioned one time before is when someone goes to another person that's had that problem, it's not really not being judged, but I can relate to that situation type thing. So you've been down that road, so you know what I'm going through, so they don't have to recreate the whole process. That person has been there and done that, and maybe even worse things. So,
and I think that people that has not been addicted, that has not went through the process, I think that we all have good intentions when we try to counsel people and help people and try to help them get back on their place. But sometimes, even with good intentions, we may say things the wrong way or present ourselves a different way, that we're really trying to help someone and give good advice, but it may come off to that person that's in that place of addiction as being arrogant or being not understanding or not compassionate to what I'm going through. And so when you have these people like Caleb that's going through this, that goes back to talk with these people, they know what they're going through. They know the place they're at. And when these people describe where they're at in their life, the people that's trying to help them can relate with them and say, well, I know where you're at. I've been there. Let me tell you my story. And it helps give those people the courage to kind of keep pushing forward and to keep going on.
Well, we do have Christmas coming up.
We do.
And I'm looking forward to that. And let's see, what are your big plans for Christmas?
Nothing.
Nothing?
No,
the sheriff's office staff, what days are you guys closed?
We are closed Monday and Tuesday of next week. Christmas Eve and Christmas Eve and Christmas Day will be. Is that right? Christmas Day's on Monday,
yeah.
Right? I think we're closed Monday and Tuesday and back open on Wednesday. I think that's what it is. We're closed on Christmas Day and the day after, and then we're back open on Wednesday. That's for our office staff, but of course we work all the time. As far as patrol duties and that nature. One of the questions that's come up a lot here recently is about the situation that's going on in Andrews with Andrews Police Department. As you know, they've been a change in administration in Andrews, got a new mayor and a new board. They have made some changes within the police department up there. And some of the officers there that were left at the police department decided that they had applied for jobs in other places and have left and going to work at other law enforcement agencies. So they're very short-handed at Andrews at this point. So the mayor has come to us, and we met with the mayor and with our county manager and commissioner the other night and discussed what we can do and what we can't do there in Andrews. But as a sheriff's office, we feel like it's important to step in and provide law enforcement for those folks in Andrews. We want to make sure that we're very understanding, very clear about this, is that as the sheriff and the sheriff's office, I do not have a desire, don't want to, have no desire of trying to take over Andrews as far as being the law enforcement there and closing the police department down and all those kind of things, because I know those rumors are flying rampant up there. All I'm interested in, and all the sheriff's office is interested in, is helping with Andrews and helping provide law enforcement and security there in Andrews as they're going through their rebuilding process and rebuilding phase. So in doing so, that we have worked the schedule out with the police department up there to their people will be patrolling some. We'll have sheriff's deputies coming in the town and patrolling some and covering hours where they're not there. So I want the people of Andrews that's listening to understand that you're not doing without law enforcement services. We will be there to step in. When those folks at your police department are not available, we will be stepping in to help you with those law enforcement services and responding to calls in Andrews, and even be doing some patrolling in Andrews and things of that nature. So, like I say, we're just here to help. We're not here to take over. We're just here to help. And so I hope that clarifies some of the rumors that might be floating around out there and some of the things that are going on. But you ask about Christmas and what we'll be doing during Christmas. Because of these duties and because of the extra help that Andrews needs and stepping in there, we've got extra people on duty coming in to cover shifts and to do things during the Christmas season. Hopefully this Christmas will be like Christmases in the past, and it'll be nice and quiet and calm and not a whole lot going on. And that's what we're shooting for, and it's what we hope to happen. But we want to bring those extra people in there to help with those services.
So right now, when someone calls Andrews Police Department and there's no one on duty in Andrews, are the calls forwarded to dispatch?
Right. Our dispatch center, it dispatches for Andrews Police Department also, as we do for Murphy Police Department after 5 p.m. and on weekends. We do that for Murphy every night and on weekends. They have their own dispatcher during the day. But for Andrews Police Department, we do it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week anyway.
Okay.
So when people in Andrews call 911, it comes to our dispatch center. And when they need services, it comes to our dispatch center anyway. So what we're doing is when those officers are not on shift, just simply, instead of dispatching a police officer, they'll dispatch a sheriff's deputy to it.
Okay, so basically you already have that relationship established with taking in the phone calls.
Right.
You're just providing some additional services right now during the transition period.
Right. And hopefully they'll get those issues resolved pretty quick and get that back on their feet up there and get going again. We've tried to work with the mayor and the board up there about giving some advice and about how to go through a hiring process and setting up hiring boards and things of that nature, as far as trying to find a good chief and trying to find someone that can take the reins at the police department and go with it up there. People don't understand this a lot of times, and I don't fully understand it. I just know that I've been to the sheriff's training, been to the schools, and took some specialized training on this. But it's been ruled by the federal court, and there was actually an opinion written by Lacey Thornburg, a federal judge, on the fact of the role of sheriff in North Carolina, or the role of sheriff period, but as it applies to North Carolina, is that the sheriff is deemed, even by the federal courts, as the chief law enforcement officer for that county. And so the buck stops with the sheriff. And all law enforcement duties and everything that goes on in that county, the sheriff is responsible for. That does not mean, however, that the sheriff is the supervisor of the police departments. But one thing that they have ruled in there is that police departments can exist and can function within a county as long as they meet the standards of the state. And it also puts in there, according to the opinion of Judge Thornburg, is that the sheriff also approves that and okays that. And so there's a lot of power that comes with the office of sheriff, but I'm not one to try to take over things and try to dominate things, because there's plenty of county for us to have law enforcement duties and other things going on in this county that we dedicate our deputies for and our investigators and things of that nature. However, those folks in the town of Andrews are tax-paying Cherokee County tax-paying citizens, so they are citizens of Cherokee County. So as being the chief law enforcement officer of the county, we are obligated to protect those citizens just like we would anybody else in the county. And so we want to step in and do what we can to help those people up there. But like I say, even though that does not mean you're supervisor of the police department, it does mean that the sheriff is still ultimately responsible for what goes on there. So the town wants me to be actively involved, and my staff actively involved in the hiring of a new chief and seeking that new chief and giving them advice on how to look for that, how to do that. And we're more than happy to do that for those folks up there. And hopefully before too long, they'll have someone hired that can work well with the sheriff's office and continue that relationship we've had in the past with the police departments, and get them back on their feet and get them rebuilt up there.
It's really not a competing type service. You are both law enforcement, and it's important that the agencies work together, the offices and the departments. And a lot of people have in their brain all these imaginary boundaries that, well, they are boundaries of jurisdiction. And you basically, the sheriff's office has jurisdiction of the entire county, even inside the city limits. So that's always been present. But the police department, they don't have jurisdiction outside those limits, correct?
They have 1 mile outside of their boundary, their city limit boundary. But one thing that we do as a sheriff's office is we enter mutual aid agreements with both towns, both Andrews and Murphy. So we give their police officers the ability to go outside their city limits and do things. One thing about a mutual aid agreement that still is a little confusing with a lot of people, even with police officers, sometimes it's a little confusing, is that doesn't give the police departments the right to just go anywhere in the county and do whatever they want to do. What those mutual aid agreements do is that upon request, they can come outside their city limits and assist. For example, if the other night we had a situation up in Andrews that was basically a barricaded subject with a gun and had children and family within the house. We had every officer we had working up there trying to assist with that situation, helping get kids out of the house. The person actually came out and shot at us while we were attempting to rescue some kids and stuff out of the home.
Oh, wow.
And actually, we spent a lot of time up there trying to get him in custody without hurting him or hurting anybody in that family, and we were successful in that. And we're able to do that. But for example, on that, it took all of our patrol duties dedicated to that. So one thing I noticed with dispatch was I heard them tell Murphy Police Department while we were up there is that they were now officially the responding officers for the county. And so if we had something else going on in the county during that time, they would have dispatched Murphy Police Department to that. So that's kind of how mutual aid works, is that upon needing their assistance or needing their help, we can contact those police departments to come outside their city limits and help us with those things. And vice versa, we go in and out of the cities and do things inside the cities. And we just find it important to do those mutual aid agreements with all of our surrounding people. I have actually entered into a mutual aid agreement with all 100 counties in North Carolina with their sheriff's offices.
Oh, wow.
So we actually have mutual aid assistance with every sheriff's office in Cherokee County.
Can that kind of
in the state of North Carolina, excuse me.
Can that mutual aid assistance go over state lines like in Georgia or Tennessee?
You can do some limited assistance, but it depends on the state. Like, for example, Tennessee is a reciprocal state of North Carolina, which means both governors have agreed to that under a mutual aid agreement that we can assist each other in both states. If I'm in a police chase or I go into Tennessee and I'm pursuing someone there, I have the same authority in Tennessee as I would here in Cherokee County on that particular incident that I'm on. But Georgia is different. Georgia is not a reciprocal state. So if we go into Georgia, once we cross that line, we are acting as a private citizen in Georgia. So, deadly force and those type of things in the state of Georgia would be looked at as if you were a private citizen in Georgia and if a private citizen used deadly force. So, but Tennessee is viewed as if you're a police officer in Tennessee and using that deadly force for Tennessee police officers. So it's different depending on the state you go in, how that mutual aid works with other states.
And we even have a mutual aid agreement with the tribal police, correct?
We do. We have a mutual aid agreement with them also for reservation property. And we quite often, we're asked to respond to the casino or different properties in Cherokee County to assist the tribal police out here on calls that they're on.
And that's a different situation because they are a nation instead of a state. So how does
they're a nation inside of a nation.
A nation inside of a nation. How does that work, or does that complicate situations with them being a different form of government?
It does. It complicates the situation on the fact of that technically when law enforcement goes onto tribal property, in all essence, it's the same as going to Mexico or going to Canada or a bordering nation. But we are able to enter into mutual aid agreements with the tribe and with their reservation properties. And so it makes that a little bit different than going to Mexico or Canada because we do have that ability to go do that. But it's still kind of like we talked with the towns. It's upon request of going in there. It does not give the sheriff's office the ability to do whatever we want to on tribal property and to go whenever we want to go. But what it does enable us to do is when a tribal officer is called to go to tribal property, but they may be out of pocket or not close, they can contact our dispatch center and say, would you guys handle that for us? And we can go on that property and handle it for the tribal police. And that happens quite often. And if we know that tribal police is going to a dangerous situation, a lot of times they will request our assistance to go with them to help them with those situations. And vice versa, tribal police helps us. Well, I know a lot of things that we do in our county. On the situation I was talking about the other night, that was in the late night where we had the guy with a gun, we contacted tribal SWAT team, for them to come out and assist us with that. We had it resolved before they arrived, but they were on their way out to help us with that, and we actually had some tribal officers show up on scene up there. So that mutual aid assistance works both ways.
All right. I was looking at the Cherokee County Sheriff's Office Facebook page because we have some press releases, and I think the latest one that Roger sent out was about that Andrews, the armed standoff situation. Right. And I'm glad that came to a peaceful end.
I want to say this, too, and I've not viewed the press release that Rogers put out. I know we talked about it and had a statement put in there, but I want to commend my deputies that handled that the other night. I came from home up there when I learned about the situation, was trying to figure out how we were going to handle this. And the deputies that were there that night, the sergeant Cody Williams was the sergeant that was on duty that night, was kind of heading everything up. They were able to successfully get 2 children out of the house when it was happening. They were, as I said, the gentleman came out and actually fired a round off at the front door. I think he was attempting, according to statements that we heard, attempting suicide by cop, trying to get us to shoot him. He actually came out and fired a round off, retreated back into the house. But the officers, the deputies that responded there that night, was able to contain the situation and to get him in custody and to get him arrested without taking his life or firing back at him. And
wow.
And I tell you, I just really am so proud of my deputies of the way they handled that situation. And there were several times there they would have been very justified in taking the man's life and doing those things. But because of children being present, because of a wife in the home, because of these things that was happening, these deputies used professional judgment on what to do and what not to do, and were actually able to arrest him and take him into custody without hurting him and without them getting hurt.
And what a lot of people don't think about is that in a situation like that, they have to make really quick decisions on what their actions are going to be.
Right.
You can't just sit there and think about it for a while and say, okay, because things are happening in a very dangerous situation so quickly. So it takes a quick thinker and someone who is highly trained to make the right situation for the right outcome.
Right, it does. And that's the thing about it. And when you view these things on television, these officer-involved shootings and things of that nature, that gets replayed over and over and over on national television. What people tend to forget is those officers are making millisecond decisions, reacting to things that are in front of them. And so looking back on things and replaying it in slow motion and zooming in and all that kind of stuff. And it's easy to say, well, you should have done this, should have done that, should have made this decision. But when you're making those split-second decisions, there's all kind of things running through your mind. A little bit more lighthearted, humorous kind of thing that happened yesterday is I thought I would drop down to Trader's Corner and just kind of look at what weapons they had in there. I thought it might buy me an early birthday or an early Christmas present,
Right.
And so I stepped out of the car and doing the things I shouldn't do because I wasn't there for business. I stepped out of the car without handcuffs and without a radio, and just going to walk in there and talk to Doc and some of those folks in there. And a guy came out the door that we had warrants on, and when I recognized him and he recognized me and I tried to talk to him, he took off running. And so we had kind of had like a mini standoff there in the parking lot, chasing each other around the car, trying to get him stopped and figure out what was going on. But when you're doing that, I can remember thinking, as I'm trying to get a hold of him, I'm thinking, okay, I think we got warrants. Do we have warrants? Am I justified in grabbing him? Am I justified if I put handcuffs on him? He's got a knife in his hand. What if he don't lay the knife down and I have to do force? Because I'm not sure whether the warrant's there still or not. If I wind up shooting him, what if he don't have a warrant? And so in milliseconds, all these things are going through your mind. And people don't understand that that's what officers are going through. That's what they're thinking about when these type of things are happening.
And you have to also figure out what legal repercussions could happen from your actions. So that has to go through your mind at some point as well. But I know that you're probably thinking, even if you didn't know about the warrants, that he's running from me for something. There's a reason he's running.
Yeah. And so when you think about that, and you think about, because he did have a knife in his hand, and when you think about that, what if you chased him through the parking lot and tackle him and he gets hurt, or you get in a wrestling match and the knife comes out and you wind up shooting him? Then the whole question comes in, if there hadn't have been a warrant in existence, the whole question would have been you were not justified in chasing him in the first place. So then everything that happened after that, you would be liable for, both criminally and civilly liable. And if something bad would have happened and there was not a warrant, if it hurt the person or whatever, myself could wind up going to prison because of it. So officers are constantly evaluating these things in their mind. And when you watch these things on TV and replaying things in slow motion, people are not realizing that officers are making those millisecond decisions on that. But going back to the thing in Andrews the other night, that's why I want to praise these officers so much for their actions, because they could have been totally justified in taking other actions and other measures, but they were evaluating all these things because of their training and because of their professionalism. They were evaluating all these other issues that were going on, from children being in the home to justifications of things and what they should do and shouldn't do. And, and you got to think about, if he's standing in the front door and you do fire at him, you got to think you're responsible for your bullet. So if it goes in there and strikes a kid, you're responsible for that,
Wow. There's a lot of liability assigned with your kind of work.
Right, there is. And so, like I say, going again, that's just one of the things that the average citizen don't think about, what the officers go through out there.
It is easy to judge from hindsight on what. I'll go back and watch some of our videos, and I criticize myself. Think, well, I should have asked that question differently. That kind of didn't sound right, the way I asked that. Yeah. And so, but yeah, in a situation that's a deadly situation that you're in, it does take a lot to ask yourself, what do I need to do to remedy this situation? Right. I do like to go over press releases that that we post throughout the week, because we have a lot of folks listening on the radio that may not have access to our Facebook page.
Right.
So there's another situation that involved a shooting spree. A Marble man was arrested after he was going armed to the terror of the public and injury to personal property. Tell us about that situation.
We got a 911 call on, you have the date on there? I don't even remember what date it was.
That
last
was on
week.
December 12th.
Yeah, December 12th. We got a 911 call of several folks calling at the same time that they're at the Marble area on Airport Road, just down below the post office, down there at the intersection on Airport Road. Was a man walking down the highway with a firearm. And then just shortly after that, we started getting 911 calls of him discharging the firearm, of shooting around, shooting up in the air, screaming, yelling, firing the gun as cars were driving by and around residential section. Sergeant Mitch Morgan responded to that. Myself and Jake Chapman, one of our first sergeant, responded to that call. And we were able to get him into custody down there again, without having to fire up on him or hurt that person. A little bit of negotiation. We got him to put the gun down, and then got him to give up. But basically what that came into was a person that was intoxicated. Still, he doesn't know why, hasn't given an offer why he was shooting a gun and walking down the middle of the highway, but he was intoxicated at the time, and I think probably just didn't know kind of what he was doing at the time.
People can do really stupid things when they're intoxicated at a certain level.
Right. But again, that was another situation where Sergeant Morgan was, he's a trained negotiator and has done some negotiating work. And so through his training and experience was able to talk him into putting the firearm down and to surrendering without having to hurt him or take his life.
All right. Earlier, let's see, on December 10th, there was a 32-year-old man from Robbinsville that is arrested for possession of a weapon of mass death and destruction, and that ends up being a sawed-off shotgun.
And that got a lot of comments.
Yeah, a lot of people don't understand what is the purpose of sawing off a shotgun.
The purpose and the reason it is considered a weapon of mass destruction, the reason it's illegal, is you cannot have a shotgun with a barrel less than 18 inches or an overall length. I think it's 24 inches overall length. And what the reason for that is that people can take that and hide it down their pants. They can put it under their shoulder, in a coat, things of that nature. And with a shotgun, you can put things like buckshot in it, and rounds. If you have an automatic shotgun, you can load them with 8 or 10 rounds if you take different plugs out of them. And if they're loaded with buckshot, each round could have 9 or so pellets for each round. So if you got 10 rounds with 9 pellets, that's 90 in essence, 90 bullets flying that you can put under your coat. So the state of North Carolina has made that rule, and because so many pellets can be involved in that, and so many could through that concealment method, that they've considered it a weapon of mass destruction, that you can do a lot of damage with that. I don't know if anybody's ever saw what buckshot can do to a wall or a door or an animal or a person. You would understand that 10 rounds of buckshot can do a lot of damage, and it can hurt a lot of people.
So the possession of a sawed-off shotgun is illegal in North Carolina.
Right.
And
like I say, is that barrel, as long as it's over 18 inches, it's not considered a weapon of mass destruction. Or if the overall length is more than 24 inches, it's not considered a weapon of mass destruction. But if it's less than 24 inches overall or less than 18-inch barrel, it falls into that category.
So,
and I think that overall length is 24. It's been a while since I've looked that statute up.
So is it a situation where they actually buy a gun and then alter it themselves?
They alter it themselves, yeah.
And what is the purpose? If I were to buy a gun, why would I want to do that?
For mass destruction.
Okay.
That's the purpose of it. I mean, there's no reason that you would want to saw a barrel length less than 18 inches or overall length of less than 24 or 36 inches for the purpose of anything other than concealment and to conceal that weapon. So that's why it's illegal, because there's no other reason, there's no other purpose for it than to conceal it.
I was trying to wrap my head around that.
Yeah.
Why was that one getting so much attention? Is it because people were disagreeing with the law?
I think it's because they were disagreeing with the law. Some of the things I read, I've just quit reading them after a while, but some of the things I read on there was right to possess firearms and right to defend yourself and all those kind of things in the Constitution. But it comes back to those mentality and idea of, do you have a right to carry a grenade launcher? Do you have a right to have an Abrams tank in your yard? And so there has to be parameters somewhere. And I think you have people that don't agree with the parameters and don't agree with what those parameters should be. That
makes sense.
Yeah.
I noticed, is it a new thing? You've always posted change of addresses for registered sex offenders. The last one had actually a picture of the building that he was living in. Is that something new? Is that a law or just something that's a service?
Well, it's both. The law on that is that when we go out and we check on sex offenders, when they do a change of address, ever so often we go out and actually Roger Williams takes time that he does what we call a check, and we'll call extra people in, and he'll divide up the folders of the sex offenders of different places they're living around the county. And what we are required to do is we're required to go to these places where they are registered as they're living and to check and make sure that they're there. And one of the things that we do as we go and check on these people is you take photographs of their home, and you take photographs, not interior, but exterior of their home, and you take photographs of the vehicles they're driving. And that goes into the file as to where they're located and what the vehicles are driving and where they're living. And that goes for the purpose of because of any accusations later by victims, or if you have a person that says, I was attacked by someone driving a red BMW, and they look this way, they had a scruffy beard, they had a scar on their eye, whatever it may be, then we can go back to those files and compare to the sex offenders and say, okay, I have a sex offender here with the scar on his eye that drives a red BMW, and here's a picture of it and tag number and all those kind of things. So that all becomes part of that file as to where they're registered. Now, I do know there was also a problem on that as far as people posting, because I think one of them had put on there that he was living in a campsite. And what people don't understand about that is we can't tell people where they can live and where they can't live.
Right.
We can't say there's no government campsite there, so you can't register there. We can't say you can't register here or there. We have to put down where they tell us they're staying. And so when they tell us where they're staying, then we still fall under those guidelines that we still have to go back and check up that they are where they say they are. If it's one of those things where they moved, I know that the person that was at the campsite, someone had contacted me and said he's no longer there, he's staying at this location. So I think that was the picture you was talking about, where they said I think that was the same person.
I think so. The one I'm talking about was on Andrews Road across from Big Lots.
Yeah, I think that was the same person that was at the campsite, but somebody called and said he had moved. But even at that, they have 3 days to register. So they can technically move and be gone from a location up to 3 days without registering. As long as they register within a 3-day period, they've not violated the law. So, and that gives people the ability to go on a vacation or to, go out of town for the day or that kind of thing. They don't have to keep track of every single movement they make. One of the things they do, if they're going to be gone somewhere more than 3 days, they still have to register with Roger that they're going to Florida for 2 weeks, or here going on to Las Vegas for 14 days or whatever. So if they're going to be gone more than 3 days, they still have to register and tell us where they're going and that kind of thing. But as long as they're not going to be gone for 3 days, they don't have to do a change of address or re-register or anything. And if they do have a change of address, they have 3 days to tell us that they've moved.
And when you said you can't really do much about them getting a campsite,
right,
unless it's on someone's private property,
right,
and they're trespassing, you can take care of that situation.
But still, that wouldn't be for us to say you can't be there. That would be for that property owner to say we want them off our property. We don't want them here. Then we would step in from the law and what we can do legally there. But what I'm saying is, if someone comes in the register and say, I'm at Tim Radford's vacant field down at wherever, and I've got a tent there and that's where I'm staying, it's not for me to check up and check with Tim Radford to make sure they can be there. That we have to take whatever they tell us is their location as their location. Then if Tim Radford don't want them there, he can call the sheriff's office and say, hey, I didn't know they were there. I don't want them there. I want you to come move them.
So as the owner of the vacant field, it's my responsibility to notify your office.
Right.
If I go and say, hey, you need to move, and he doesn't comply.
Now, one thing is, that we do when you're registering, of course, if you're trying to register an address that's next to a school, or next to a place that you're not supposed to be.
A daycare,
whatever it may be, then that, or a park or something like that, that's when Roger would step in and say, no, I can't register you here because you're going to be in violation here. Now, if you follow through this, say that's where you're going to be or that's where you're at, we're going to violate you and put you in jail. So you understand that.
And that's where it gets a little gray too, like especially in a public campground where there's kids and playgrounds, and even the controversial one about the church, because there's kids there, Sunday school classes. So there's a lot of.
But the thing is, and this is what people don't understand, they're not restricted from being where children might be. They're restricted from being for like places of education, like a public school or a daycare center, where groups of children are going to be there every day in a location where they're going to be and what's happening, there. Even, like churches and things like that, all that's been challenged even with Sunday school and stuff, where basically the judges are saying, no, they have a right to go to church. So that's going to be up to the pastors of those churches as to whether they're going to allow them to be there or not,
Right. So
the pastor of the church or the board of deacons or whoever may say, we're not going to allow sex offenders here. So we don't want them on our property. And if they come, then we consider them trespassing. They can do that within their churches, which is the crime is not being near children. The crime is trespassing at that point. So, so you get into those gray areas there with that.
And
also,
I can see both sides of the story. Perhaps that person is going there to better his life,
right?
And that there needs to be a recovery, but he's on that list for lifetime, so he's probably scarred.
Well, you think about this though. If the ban was from being around anywhere children's at,
you couldn't be anywhere.
You couldn't go anywhere. You couldn't go to Walmart. You couldn't go to town. You couldn't go to the theater. You couldn't do anything. You'd just have to be a recluse in your home, because anytime you went to any public place, you would be violating the law. And so that's why those have those certain restrictions on where you can be and where you can't be. And sometimes people, like I say, don't fully understand that either. But that's why the law is set up that way.
All right. Well, Sheriff, I can see that we have gone beyond our time allotted, and thank you as always for coming on the show. And anything you want to close out with?
No, I just want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and be safe out there. And maybe they're kind of calling off. We might get a little bit of white stuff.
Anyway, we'll stop talking about snow possibilities.
Right.
I always like to interrupt the sheriff when he starts talking nonsense talk like snow.
Yeah. I don't think we're going to get any Christmas morning, but we might get a few flurries, it looks like. So.
All right.
Could you deal with a few flurries?
I could deal with a few flurries.
Okay.
If you can deal with a broom in your hand again.
Okay, that'll work.
All right. It's WKRK Radio in Murphy, North Carolina, 1320 AM, 105.5 FM, cable TV channel 25, and worldwide at country.am.